Yeah, you were saying how things are going down in Bluffton?
Yeah, so Bluffton is great, about the same as when you left, except for a lot more green and a lot warmer.
Yeah, I can see Bluffton being excruciatingly hot in the summer.
It's not any worse than Austin.
You don't think so?
No, absolutely not. Humidity, maybe, but it's nice.
Yeah. I always tell people that Atlanta's a little bit more humid than Austin, but maybe
Really?
I'm mistaken. I don't know, but either way.
Yeah.
How is
it is, regardless, it's very nice outside right now. So our winter grazing has taken off. Everything is just, it's a shade of green that does not ever occur except for in March and April.
Which is crazy because even when I went, I remember remarking how green it was in November. So I got to get down there again. Me and Harry and Brett and the team are trying to get a trip down there at some point. I think that would be incredible.
Y'all need to come. When I talked to them, they said they would. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see if we got to put our money where our mouth is. But that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Last time, so I spoke to you after I recorded the podcast with your dad, Will, down in Bluffton, which I've thanked you many times, but thank you again for that. That was an incredible experience. Me and my dad, my brother had just a wonderful time down there, getting to hang out with you guys and see what y'all get to do every day. It was really one of the cooler experiences I've gotten to have from the podcast. So thank you for that.
Thank y'all for making the trip.
Yeah. It's 3 hours from Atlanta. Nothing. That's not a problem.
It's not that bad.
No, not at all. I'm sure more people probably do. A lot of people come down there or no?
Yeah, we have a lot of visitors. It's certainly seasonal, spring and fall. Nobody wants to be here when it's super hot or wet, cold in the winter, but we do host a lot of folks.
Yeah, actually, it's funny is while your dad and I were recording the podcast at his office, somebody came to the door trying to get a book signed. Just somebody from out of town, I guess, which was pretty funny. But I guess that's got to be a little bit interesting because it's such a small town, but then having sort of strangers just come through and knock on your office door. What's that like?
Oh, they're not strangers at that point. If they come to the small town, they're part of the family. One thing's for sure, you can't hide. That's a given.
Yeah. I'm reminded of the sign underneath the guns in the restaurant. How it's like these guys are gone, the guns are back, or something like that. That was just funny how that worked out. But you went on Joe Rogan with your dad. I'm curious what that was like, going on the most famous media outlet in the entire world.
Well, it was an honor to get asked to be able to go on, and it was hard going on with Dad because he gets nervous about nothing. It's like, oh, the sky's falling. He's like, all right, well, I knew it was going to happen, so here we are. So he would not play into the nerves at all. He was cool and calm. He never once got nervous. I was the nervous one, and I was only nervous because I wanted to represent the work that we do here and all the other farmers, that farm like we do. I wanted to represent them well. And so the nerves were more so like, okay, you got one shot. This probably won't ever happen for you again. So make the most of it. And when we got started, it was really a calm experience. Joe is so kind and such a lifelong learner that there was no agenda, there was no talking points, there were no sound bites. It was like sitting down to talk to an old friend.
That's a really, from my perspective as a podcaster, that's what I want to get to, where somebody sits
You're
down.
You're there. I feel like I'm talking to a friend.
Yeah, well, true. I guess that's a good point. I guess we are technically friends, but just to have you literally met Joe Rogan and then you're saying he feels like an old friend. That's a really unique skill and very valuable. What did the aftermath of that, did it kind of unfold as you expected? How did people react to that? Because I listened to the conversation. It was awesome.
Yeah. So after it was released, it was actually released when we were on the way home. So I think we recorded on Monday or Tuesday and then left the next day. And they went ahead and flipped it and got it out very quickly. And of course, immediately when it came out, people were texting saying, "Oh, good job! That was great." We got a lot of inbound from people who had never heard of us, never heard of regenerative agriculture, that were wanted to learn more. The general store saw a ton of visitors through, the rest of the month of November and December through the holidays. Joe Rogan brought a lot of people to Bluffton and brought a lot of people to regenerative agriculture. And I'm really, really thankful for that.
Yeah, that's actually, so I had heard of y'all originally from either like Liver King or Paul Saladino or something like that. And then I remember taking note of the fact y'all were in Georgia, because obviously I was in Georgia. And then I think the Rogan podcast came out with your dad like 2 years ago or so.
The November before. So Dad was on in November of 22, and then he and I were both on in November of 23.
Yeah, so that the first one with him, that's when I was like, oh wow, I got to like prioritize getting down here at some point. And that's when I started buying from y'all. Me and my brother and my dad would all buy like liver, ribeyes, which are some of the best freaking ribeyes I've ever had in my life. Just a bunch of stuff, bone marrow, all that type of stuff. So I'm sure that that's probably one of the benefits of Rogan. Like, I mean, the amount of demand that guy drives is pretty high. So y'all saw a pretty steep increase.
Yeah, we actually, thanks to Joe, we're able to grow our direct-to-consumer sales considerably from 22 to 23, and then, 23 into 24. I think the demand is somewhat leveling out, the post-Rogan demand, but it's a good, 12 to 16 weeks of just pure chaos because, there's just all this awareness. It went from, not being aware to very aware. And so it was a big blessing for us.
Yeah. And when you said you want to represent the work that you're doing down there, well, it's really a twofold question that I have. Like, A, what's the work? Like, what is the work that you're doing? And then B, like, why does that matter so much to you? Why is it so important to you to represent it so well?
Yeah. So, I'm the director of marketing. And so, taking all the hard work that's done by the, 100+ people that are here at White Oak Pastures, what they do, I get to summarize and tell it in stories. And representing them and their hard work is really important. If we're not storytellers at the end of the day, then I'm not doing my job. So, that was kind of first and foremost for me. And it's not just us. There are farms all over the country that are doing what we do. And I wanted to represent them well also. White Oak Pastures can't feed the world. And so helping consumers find farmers like us to shop more locally was really important.
Yeah, and like I said, I think you did a great job. I think it was actually interesting hearing Will on the first episode with just him and Joe, and then to have you in there. It was kind of cool, and I don't know if your dad did this intentionally or y'all talked about it, but it was kind of cool that he, like, in some parts of the conversations, he just gave the reins to you.
Yeah.
Even though he's like Will Harris, and it's like sort of this, like, the figurehead of regenerative agriculture. He's like, here, Jenni, you got this. How did that feel?
We're in this really interesting spot where, I'm 37, so I'm no spring chicken. He's 70. He's no spring chicken. So we're kind of further, paving our lanes with what can we contribute to this food system. And I'm, really blessed to work with my sister, my wife, my brother-in-law, and my dad. And so while I was the one that got to go on Rogan, it's not like I do it all. If it's tourism related, my younger sister, that is her jam. Events, workshops, that is her. If it is being raised, it's my brother-in-law. It's all John. If it's a specialty product, it's all Amber. And so I think the really interesting thing that we're kind of in the midst of is it used to just be like a one-man show, and Dad was the man. And he's done a tremendous amount of heavy lifting for regenerative ag, for White Oak Pastures, for this movement as a whole. But it can't just be up to him, because this movement and this thing is going to last a lot longer than he will. And so he has no retirement plans or departure plans, but he knows that, every day he'll work a little less, and, that'll be the day that we get to work a little more.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's super cool to see the familial aspect of it, especially because it's now becoming like a bigger thing. Like White Oak, I don't know how many Instagram followers y'all have, but it's like it's a big thing. Like, people know about it. Y'all literally went on Joe Rogan, which is the biggest media outlet in the world, which is like, you think about going from Bluffton, Georgia, a town of like 104 people to like probably tens of millions of downloads. That's just pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and again, we're very lucky for that. We can't sell all the meat that we want and need to sell in Bluffton, Georgia, population 103. We've got to get it out there, and that's true for us and true for everybody else.
Yeah, that's one of the things that your dad has said, and I remember him saying this like pretty early on, is like he doesn't want White Oak Pastures to feed the world because they can't. He wants there to be a White Oak Pastures in every corner of every state, feeding their community and all these things. So what do you think is the number one thing keeping that from being a possibility?
Dad has always been a visionary, but in 2021 founded CFAR, the Center for Agricultural Resilience, and that's to really focus on education. We can only produce so much. We can only process so much. We can only feed so many people. And the last thing that the regenerative agriculture movement needs is, a big ag approach to what should be, regional food systems. And so Dad founded CFAR to give, high net worth individuals, corporations, whatever, the ability to donate money to train other farmers that might be interested in replicating some parts of what we did over the past 30 years. And so, for us, education is a huge part of what we do because we figured out a lot of stuff. We've been around for a while. We've made a lot of mistakes, but we've also had some success. And so sharing that with other farms so that they don't have to make those same mistakes again, is pretty important.
Yeah. And it also just like reduces the barrier of entry into because obviously the shift that your dad made, and if anybody hasn't listened to, you can go listen to him talk to Rogan or my episode with him if you want to learn about like the actual shift. He went from industrial farming and like pretty much was like, yeah, I'm done with this. And then slowly started making decisions towards what's going on now. And that can be a pretty daunting thing. I heard something where he was saying where like there was a lot of nights where he's like, am I making the wrong decision? Like, am I completely screwing up the farm that my kids are supposed to inherit? Which kind of brings me to my next like curiosity is what was it like growing up in Bluffton on White Oak with Will Harris as your dad?
That there's a lot that could be packed into that answer. So I'll start with what was it like growing up here? And truthfully, I didn't view our farm as anything special. Hell, it wasn't special. We were a commodity, cattle feeding operation through most of my childhood. Dad didn't start transitioning the farm to what it is today until the mid-90s. I was born in 86, so, I was, young and had no real concept of what food was. It just sort of magically arrived in front of me 3 times a day, and that was awesome. So the farm for me was, just a way to express a relationship with my dad. I was a tomboy. I was a daddy's girl. His saying for me was that I stuck with him like a hair in a biscuit. And, it's true. I didn't care if we were feeding cows, castrating bulls. It didn't matter to me. It was just a way for me to spend time with my dad. And so I had no real, conscious decisions about what the farm was or should be. It was just, it just was what it was. Growing up with my dad as a dad, now that's where it gets kind of fun. I can remember him dropping me off at pre-K, so pre-kindergarten, and, tying my shoe and getting down with me and, all right, baby, I want you to have a good day. I want you to be fair and I want you to be nice, but if there's somebody mean, I want you to kick them in the shin. You just kick. Don't stop kicking until the teacher pulls you off. You just keep on going. If anybody's ugly to you, you kick as hard as you can. You won't get in trouble. You just kick. Just kick. And, I was raised that way to defend myself, to be as nice as I could possibly be, but to not be taken advantage of. And, I think Dad's motto was, don't raise your little girls to be sweet. Raise them to be fair. Raise them to be strong. And as a man who is as macho and manly as my dad, to have 3 daughters and to feel so empowered and to feel so not only protected, but armed to protect myself at such a young age was very special. I think, we kind of do our daughters a disservice. We tell them, be sweet. You be sweet. And the truth is, don't be sweet. Be kind. Be nice. Be fair. But don't be sweet.
Kick somebody in the shin if you need to.
That's exactly right. And I've never had to kick anybody in the shins.
One thing you just said that I sort of just immediately thought of, like, the microcosm of small town America and, like, the downfall of small town America. Like, you think of what Southern hospitality is. Like, if you've never experienced Southern hospitality, like y'all showed me and my dad and my brother when we went down there, like, that's a real thing. People in the South, there's something about it. Like, it's hard to explain. But I feel like maybe the reason that these farms or these small towns have been taken advantage of or have become so impoverished. I mean, dude, small town America is, like, in a bad way, at least in the last however many decades. So maybe the reason that is like they've kind of been taken advantage of. So it's interesting to hear your dad give you that advice and then know on top of that what he's done with Bluffton and how he's kind of not been taken advantage of, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we talk a lot about rural America really being done a disservice specifically by, big agriculture. People can only live where there's opportunity for them to make a living. And when agriculture became so industrialized, so commoditized, and so centralized, so did the opportunities in places like Bluffton. Farmers don't farm where consumers consume. And so, in these very metropolitan urban city centers, there's a lot of people, but there's very little food production that happens. The food is produced in the outskirts, beyond the suburbs in rural places like Bluffton. And when agriculture was, industrialized, commoditized, and centralized, those opportunities went away. There's no room for a lot of people, for a lot of opportunity. You buy bigger equipment and employ more automation. And so, Dad talks a lot about places like Bluffton being on the brain drain for, decades. And where that's left places like Bluffton is that the people that are left are great people. They're just not many of us. We have, far more animals, far more livestock than there are people in our town. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not complaining about that. But
sounds kind of nice.
How did we get here?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about White Oak, and I said this in my conversation with Will, is that I think he said y'all went from employing 4 people or 5 people to like 160 or 150 people. I'm like, that's insane. That is, in my opinion, the most profound number associated with it, because that's 146 more people that can put food on their own family's plates. That's 146 more people that are putting money back into the Bluffton and the small town community. It's sad to me that, like, the small town in America has been the one that's been the most negatively affected by the industrialized food, because they're the ones that grow it. You would think it would be like, oh, awesome, you get more business, you get more farms, whatever, or you get more cattle. It's been the exact opposite. So I think that's the coolest number by far.
Well, and I appreciate that. Growing up, I did not aspire to live in Bluffton. I did not see myself raising a family in Bluffton, because my childhood, it was great, but it was not full of memories in a cul-de-sac with other kids playing street hockey and dolls and Barbies and whatever else. I was lucky. I had 2 sisters, one older, one younger, and so we could play with each other. But only children around here are near about attention starved, because there's not a whole lot going on. And so, for me growing up, I never aspired to live in Bluffton. I wanted to go where the bright lights were, because I associated a critical mass of people with, community. And I thought one must equal the other. And I was so wrong, as most 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, people are, that, just a sheer volume of people does not equal community. You could have 3 people that shared, the same passions and the same interests and the same hobbies, and that's a great little community. And that's what we formed in Bluffton, is a great little community all centered around the work that we're doing.
Your dad said that he does not, or actually I think he said he knows that you and your sister would not have come back unless he made a change. What sort of take me through your thought process behind that, if you don't mind, like your thought when he was an industrial farmer and the way things were, and then like the change in your brain when you saw how things were progressing. What was your process like coming back to Bluffton?
So I graduated from college in 2005, believe it or not, for almost 20 years ago, with a marketing degree. And it should come as no surprise that a person with a marketing degree does not have a whole lot of opportunity in Bluffton, Georgia. So I moved to Atlanta.
There's like one store and one restaurant for people that are wondering, and White Oak owns them.
No red lights, just
not a lot of marketing gigs in Bluffton.
No, not a lot at all. And so I knew that and I really like marketing. At the end of the day, we all kind of have our like plug and play in the things that we enjoy doing. I really like marketing. At the end of the day, I just really enjoy the subject. And so I moved to Atlanta and I worked there. And I've always had a very close relationship with my dad. We talked, even in college, we talked every single day. And I found myself living in downtown Atlanta, calling my dad so jealous of what was going on in Bluffton. Building the processing plants, selling grass-fed beef, hiring people, training people. And I thought to myself, how in the hell am I living in downtown Atlanta, Georgia, with anything and everything at my fingertips? I can just, if I want to go to a movie, I just drive 5 minutes and I'm at the movies. Compared to here, I'd have to drive an hour to get to the movies. If I need something at Target, 5 minutes. 5 minutes away. Here, it's 50 minutes away. So I remember thinking, how am I jealous of what's happening in Bluffton with all of this right here, going on around me? And, truthfully, I think I longed for that relationship that I had had with my dad for forever. And it was so incredibly exciting because it was sort of like the thing that should never have worked. White Oak Pastures popping up in Bluffton, Georgia should never have happened. On paper, it never would have penciled. It never, from a business plan perspective, should not have worked. But it worked. And so it didn't take long for me to realize that my heart was here. What I wanted to do was here, and the people I wanted to do it with were here.
Do you think that you would have ever made your way back there if it had kept being operated the way that it was?
100% no.
Wow. That's got to be so
100% no.
That's so cool to hear. I bet your dad, like that's got to be that alone is probably reason enough to justify his decision. At least for like somebody who is aspiring to be a father, like that would be so cool. Like a decision I made was like the direct reason that my kids came back and wanted to work with me. That's freaking awesome.
Yeah, I don't think he made the change to bring us back, but I think he was just absolutely delighted that of his 3 daughters, 2 wanted to come home and make a living.
How have you seen, so that's sort of like your process, how have you seen Bluffton change throughout the years, like the town of Bluffton, the people of Bluffton, as White Oak has grown?
Yeah, so Bluffton, when I grew up, was full of empty houses and people that were beyond the working age. Nobody that, I wanted to hang out with. And so fast forward, I'm 37, so fast forward 20-something years, and the houses are full of people that, are passionate about food, or passionate about the land, or passionate about communities. Of the people that live in Bluffton, those who are of working age pretty much work at White Oak Pastures. And that's really exciting. My wife and I have 2 children, and to be able to raise our children alongside others who have small children, it's just really rewarding in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, as from your perspective, it's like a direct correlation. Like if White Oak wasn't run the way that it is now, that wouldn't be the case for you. Because
and it would be the case for so many others. The people
yeah.
who are currently living and working, living in Bluffton and working at White Oak Pastures, they wouldn't be here if this was a commodity farm. It should be just another commodity farm trying to survive. In today's economic situation.
Yeah, your dad made a pretty funny joke. He said he invited me and my dad and brother to breakfast the next day, and I said he said it's the best restaurant in town. I said I'm pretty sure it's the only restaurant in town. He said it's the only restaurant for like 15 miles or something.
Exactly right.
Yeah, which is
very little competition.
Yeah, I was about to say that's pretty good business plan. Honestly, just be the only of something, but because you have the general store, and this is one of the coolest things. Another really cool number to me, like just when I think about the model and how it can entirely change a community like Bluffton, but it doesn't have to just be Bluffton. But when you walk into the general store, when you think about how it used to be ran, y'all used to sell live cattle. You would raise them and you'd ship them off, and that's it. One product, one tiny piece of a supply chain. You walk into the White Oaks general store, there's probably a few hundred SKUs, a few hundred different items from the property. They're made, they're grown, made, and then sold in Bluffton. So all that money is staying right there. All the work, all that stuff is staying right there. And that to me is one of the coolest things to think about when you think about 4 employees shipping live cattle. Nope, that's the only finished product, and really no other, I don't want to say no like importance in the supply chain, but a very small piece of a massive supply chain. Now y'all have your you own an entire supply chain.
We are a food system. When you make that comparison to 4 employees to 150, the 4 employees that worked here were all, minimum wage, unskilled laborers. And today, fast forward, we have a lot of skill here. There are people who raise livestock in, outdoors, where it takes a lot of skill to understand the weather and the feed and the grass and the grazing and the shade structures and whatever. Then there's skilled artisan butchers, people who can break down carcasses nose to tail. They can cut thick tomahawk ribeyes. They can cut short ribs. They can grind beef. It's just a tremendous amount of skill. Then there's the hospitality side. There's people who lead tours and give horseback rides, and people who sew leather items, or make leather belts, or it's just the diversity in the things that are done in Bluffton attracts a really diverse work group, and that's what's been a lot of fun. You can sit down at the table from somebody who doesn't share the same gender, the same orientation, the same religion, the same background, the same anything, and then all of a sudden have something in common.
Yeah, you decided to drive 3 hours to Bluffton.
That's right.
Yeah, well, exactly right. The other thing is just like, so I went in there, as I said, and me and my dad and my brother, I think we ended up, we left with like soap, new dog collars, dog treats, a Yeti full of meat, milk. I got shirts. I'm wearing it right now.
You look extra handsome.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's this color, actually, the white oak color.
It is.
We had candles. It was literally like all of these things. And those are things that were taken away from the small town in America. But what were the 3 things you said when it was commoditized?
Yep, commoditized, industrialized, and centralized. So commoditized is, monocultures growing the same thing. Centralized is, all the livestock are processed in these mega packing houses that process, hundreds of head of animals per hour. Industrialized are the methods that they grow it. basically killing off the naturally occurring flora and fauna in the soil and controlling it with chemical inputs. So those are kind of the three buckets that we talk about that have truly changed food production post World War II.
Yeah, and I want to dive into that like real soon because I think that's so important to understand. But the final point that I was making about that is just when those three things started to happen, those are all those little products, the dog treats, the tallows, the dog collars, the food, like it literally just all left. It was no longer made there and it was no longer sold there, and the people there could no longer use it. Right. So it all left. And then when those people there want to go buy stuff like that, where do they have to go? They have to go to some big industrialized store like Target or Walmart to buy the stuff that they could have just made in the first place. And right. It's just this crazy, it's just crazy how it's happened that way. But on the topic of the commoditized, industrialized, and centralized, what do you think was other than profit, like what were the primary drivers of that becoming the mainstream?
Yeah, Dad talks a lot about this, and after World War II, we had all of these, munitions plants and things that we needed to use. We had built up a lot of infrastructure, gone to war, and the war was over. So what do we do now? And so that really brought on a lot of the mechanization that we currently see in agriculture. Dad said those guys left, pulling a plow behind a mule and then went and drove tanks. What were they going to do? Come back home and get back behind the mule? Hell no. They're going to find something else to do. And so a lot of, research and development went in. I think one of the chemicals, I can't remember which one, I should be ashamed to not know which one, but one of them was actually derived from nerve gas that was used in war. So, we had all of these technologies that were just all of a sudden available. And so we brought them home and braided them in our everyday lives, which, took the shape of really changing our food system.
Yeah, that reminds me of the story of glyphosate. So Monsanto they manufactured Agent Orange in the Vietnam War, and they were obviously making a boatload of money on that. And the war ended, and they're like, oh wait, we need to figure out a way to make a lot more money. So then they basically just like switched over to glyphosate, which is interesting. What do you think, other than the ones we've mentioned thus far, like not downfall, because rural America is about as resilient as any group of communities in the history of the world, but like the degradation of rural America, other than that, what would you say like the biggest or most prominent negatives to those three things are in terms of the food system?
I think we have food that is, it's not near as nutritious as it used to be. We have communities that can no longer stand on their own. If there was no White Oak Pastures, Bluffton would look a whole hell of a lot different. We've basically degraded our soils, so even the land surrounding these rural communities is completely dependent on inputs. There's few job opportunities. So, people like me wouldn't stick around in South Georgia or, wherever the rural community was. I think another one is the welfare of our livestock. We figured out that it's a hell of a lot easier to control the weather and the climate and the feed conversion and, whatever else if we put them in buildings, and keep them on a very consistent ration diet. So I think that as a result, we have food that's not near as nutritious. It's wastefully abundant. It's incredibly cheap. So just a lot of losers in that.
Yeah.
Very few winners, a lot of losers.
Pretty much everybody's losing except the people that own those companies.
That's right.
One of the things that I think about a lot is food sovereignty, and the idea that like for every small farm like White Oak Pastures that goes out of business, that farm is going to be bought up by an industrial farm for pennies on the dollar. And then that farm that's owned by one of the 4 or 5, whatever companies that own most of the farmland. And then they're going to practice the same practices. They're going to be able to control more piece of the pie. And that takes away, every single time that happens, that takes away food sovereignty for me and then every other American. So that's something that I think about, especially as it relates to like supporting a company like y'all. It's so much easier knowing that and thinking about that to be like, okay, I'll pay $2 more a pound for ground beef because if that helps a company like y'all literally employ an entire town and some. Yeah. Do you guys think about food sovereignty at all? Like, is that something y'all think about?
I think that in terms of, land and the land grabbing that's happening today, I think everybody should be pretty nervous. I recently saw a chart that showed foreign ownership on, of American acres. It's just incredible how much of the land America doesn't own. It's just crazy. We think about meat specifically. Some of the largest meat companies in the world that we rely on here in the United States are not even owned by, Americans. So, Smithfield being owned by the Chinese, JBS being owned by the, Brazilians. It was just an incredible amount of fragility, I think, in the food system that I think everybody should be pretty nervous about.
Yeah, and then farms that's such a good point. And I didn't know that about Smithfield JBS, but I have seen graphs about like China and Bill Gates, and just like how consolidated American farmland is when it used to be so spread out. And farms like yours or y'all's is, in my opinion, the bedrock of that. Like, it's the bedrock of the food system, because if all of these farms get consolidated into 4 or 5 companies, then it's just going to be complete mayhem, and we're going to have literally no choice. Like, if that happens, I'm not going to be able to say, you know what, I want to buy regeneratively raised cattle or beef. I don't want to buy beef from somebody I want to buy beef from somebody who's taking care of the cattle and letting them express natural behaviors and so on and so forth. I'm not going to have that choice because it's not the most profitable in that industrialized, commoditized, and centralized system. So I think it's so important.
I talked about this on Rogan, but consumers believe that they have choice. In reality, they really don't have choice. If you go into the grocery store, there's a graphic that I put up on Rogan. Maybe you can find it, but it shows all of these subsidiary brands with like 10 anchor corporations around the perimeter. And so you wouldn't know it, but if you look up like what brands does Tyson own, there are a dozen brands that say nothing about Tyson, but that look like Grassy Knoll, White Picket Fence, Red Barn. This is a Tyson product. So consumers are really under the impression that there's a tremendous amount of choice in the grocery store. And that's unfortunately not the case. There's not a lot of choice. And I think that, that should be incredibly alarming. In the pandemic, the CEO of Tyson actually got on like major media, I don't know, CNN, Fox, something, and said the food system as we know it is breaking. The efficient, high velocity systems that we all know work really, really well when the conditions are good. But now that we've had this thing called COVID-19 that's a disturbance, we're seeing some fragility that we didn't really recognize us having. And, we can all think back 4 years ago when we went to the grocery store and there were these, ugly signs that say, you're limited to 5 pounds of meat per person. And you'd be like, well, shit, I'm going to go and I'm going to get my spouse to go. I'm going to get my parents to go. Everybody's going to get 5 pounds. And if we can get 4 people to go, we'll have 20 pounds, which will get us through 2.5 weeks or whatever that is. That type of rationing, I think, sent people into just a real panic around, food sovereignty, like you were saying, and the fact that, we've put all of our eggs in this highly efficient system, and that efficiency was traded, and we now have fragility. That efficiency was at the cost of resilience, and so now we have fragility, and now we have to deal with fragility.
And that's a hard thing to deal with when it starts breaking. The comment you made about the grocery store is so true. I vividly remember, I mentioned this on a podcast that I had with Kara Smith, who is, her and her husband, Jeff, own Colorado Craft Beef out in Colorado. She was talking about this and like the COVID food stuff. And I remember being in Blacksburg, Virginia, where I was going to college, and I eat a lot of meat. Like I eat like at least a pound a day, most of the time, like 2 pounds of meat. And I look at the sign and it said like 2 pounds of meat per person. And I'm like, I look at my buddy, I'm like, yeah, no chance. And so I kind of,
that's not going to work for me.
No, literally, I kind of just hedged my bets on the fact that nobody was going to tell me anything. And I just bought my normal ration of meat and some because I knew they were going to be sticking down. but I just walked out of there. But the reason I bring that up is that was the first time that scared the shit out of me. I'm like, okay, these people think they can tell me how much meat that I can buy. And then you think about, this is a little conspiratorial maybe, but then you think about what are all the highly invested in products now, like the plant-based meat and alternatives. So it's like, you can't eat this, but oh, here's a perfect little thing that we own and we sell too that you can eat. And that's another rabbit hole. But I remember being very scared.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and us too, we then, were the recipient of all this business, and it was great. And we were really grateful for being able to help, but there was only so much we could do. The time to support farms like White Oak Pastures is not in the time of a crisis. It's way before the crisis happens, so that we can have lots and lots of White Oak Pastures to lean on, which is, kind of the point of not a scaled model, but a model that's really easily replicated. And, that's what we preach, is that agriculture, it should not be scaled. It should be replicated. And that's what we need is more replications of, and not just exactly the way we do it, just more people doing it different, more people that are not feeding into that commoditized, industrialized, centralized production system.
Yeah. And it's easy to get, I found myself easily black pilled is what you could say. Like sort of like, what's the word? Like pessimistic in a way. Cause you hear about all this like bad stuff going on. And one of the real blessings of working with Harry and Brett, whom you know, is in the capacity that we do work, is I'm surrounded. Like I feel like every week I meet a new rancher in Texas or in the area or over the podcast or something that's doing what y'all are doing, just in a different, there's tons of them in Texas. I've met them in Colorado, in Montana, and like all over. It's just super cool to know that there are those options. But it kind of brings a question to my mind that I'm curious of your answer is like, say I'm a consumer and I look at White Oak Pastures beef that's sold DTC and it's, let's say $10 for the sake of simplicity per pound of ground beef. And then I see this, whatever it is at Kroger, that's $6. How would you convince me that $4 is worth spending or investing, really?
Yeah. I think that you have to really talk about production systems. Cheap industrial commodity food does not really cost $6. Those production systems cause a lot of problems that are not passed along or recognized at the cash register. We talk about this in terms of the external cost of food production. So in that, just say chicken, let's just pick, in that chicken breast, in our chicken breast, you have soil that's been, that's been restored thanks to animal impact. You have the creation of local jobs. You have an independent food system. There's a lot of pluses, and we can talk a lot about those pluses. The animal impact built up the soil to grow grass, to hold dirt down so that, erosion is not a problem. Well, in commodity industrial systems, let's just say a monoculture crop of corn, you have lots of erosion. You have no rainwater being absorbed. You have no aquifers being recharged. You have a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. You have wildfires that have to be put out. You're in Texas. What about all those wildfires? And that's not to say that all wildfires are because of industrial agriculture, but truthfully, more of that could be controlled, graze breaks and things like that, with animal agriculture. So I'm a real big proponent that nobody really knows what the true cost of food production is. It's not the $2.50 a pound chicken breast at a grocery store. That there have been so many subsidies and so many costs that have been spun off elsewhere. Who's paying to clean up the Gulf of Mexico? Who's paying to put out the wildfires? Who's paying for all this? That's arguably a cost of food production, but it doesn't show up at the cash register.
Yeah, the companies that, like the industrial food companies, are not paying for it. That's for damn sure.
Right. That's right. Tax dollars are paying for it.
Which is that's a good
we're
point.
We're paying for it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because
but you wouldn't attribute that as food, a part of your food budget.
No.
When you go to pay your taxes, you don't say like, okay, well, this is for my groceries for the next, however long. That's just not the way it works.
Well, yeah, it's like part of the human psyche is the pursuit of short-term gratification and like the ease, like just the shortcut. That's just how we're wired. But when you put it that way, I mean, like when you think about all of the downstream positive effects of supporting a White Oak Pastures or Perennial Pastures or Shirttail Creek or Hagerman Ranch, like any of these people, Colorado Craft Beef, whatever it is, to me, I'm like, okay, cool. That, yeah, checks off right away. Like it's an almost innumerable amount of positive benefit. And then you think about, okay, I can save $2 a pound, but it's worse for the land, it's worse for the animals, it's worse for me, it's worse for the community, it's worse for the economy, it's worse for literally every measurable metric except for efficiency.
That's right.
And so when I think about it that way, and I'm not somebody who makes a whole lot of money, to me, it's worth the investment.
That's exactly right. I think, the unfortunate thing is that farming this way costs more money. And so it's not achievable. It's not a reality for everybody. And that sucks. I mean, I hate that, but those problems are not farmers' problems. Those are wealth disparity. Those conversations, there's a whole lot of stuff that goes into that, and it was not created by a farmer, and it ain't gonna be fixed by a farmer. So the problem still exists that raising livestock this way costs more, and we have to sell it at a higher price compared to that because we can't continue to operate if we can't cover our cost. So, it's still pretty screwed up with regard to good food for all. Well, who's going to make it available for all? Is it the government? Or, how's that going to happen?
Yeah, how are we going to incentivize farmers to be able to make that happen in the long run? And as you said, it's not a problem that farmers created, and it's sure as hell not a problem that farmers are going to solve because but then again, I kind of think about it, I'm like, well, damn, Will Harris kind of solved that problem in a way.
Uh-oh, hang on. Yeah, hang on. I'm having a malfunction. One moment.
No problem.
How about now?
All good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, good deal. I was just saying that when I think about it, like Will Harris kind of solved that problem in a way. So what's the...
Well, Will Harris figured out how to raise animals in a way where they can express their instinctive behavior and they can use their impact to positively affect the soil. Now, Will Harris can't do it cheaper. Will Harris can't do it for the same price that a commodity hamburger can be produced. That's a problem Will Harris can't fix. But figuring out the agricultural side, Will's got that.
That's a good point. So it's not, that's a pretty big leap of faith now that I think about it. Like going from a profitable endeavor in industrial farming and then saying, I know how to do this thing. I'm going to start doing this thing, but I have zero clue whether or not people are going to want it,
right.
Which is obviously in the end it's worked out. And I mean, I can't, have you guys heard any stories from like people that are ranching now or farming now that have been like, you guys really helped or were instrumental in me making the transition or switch? Like, has that been something y'all have received?
Yeah, Dad gets a lot of that. Again, I'm his daughter, so I think he hung the moon. Nobody will tell me different. But he's oftentimes getting letters and notes and emails from people who have transitioned or want to transition that he basically paved the way for them. I can't imagine the stress of wanting to do something differently, knowing that the different thing was good in a lot of different ways, and then having to educate the consumer on the good thing so that you could farm this way. It's like, I can't imagine the amount of stress and that lift for him. And I think that the world's a better place because of my dad. 100%.
I agree. I'm a better man because of your dad. I can guarantee it.
You were already a pretty good man.
Well, thank you. we spoke over about it a little bit when we were eating breakfast down in Bluffton, but just the nuance of being like in retail from a ranch like y'all's perspective. Like there's obviously direct to consumer DTC, and that's, at least from my perspective, would be what I imagine would be like what y'all would want to do. But obviously when there's you have to pay the bills, so like there has to be decisions made. What's the difference predominantly from y'all's perspective? The primary difference is working retail and DTC, and like some of the nuances with that.
Yeah, so that's in my lane. So I really have focused really hard over the past 12 or 18 months, on what's the right mix of customers for us. And I'm as grateful to our wholesale partners for supporting us as I am our online customers for supporting us. And in my mind, they do two different things. We need a very steady, amount of income every single week to be able to pay the bills. And that grocery business is high volume, lower margin, but high volume business, which accomplishes what we need for it to accomplish. We can only stand for it to be so large. There's a limit to how much of our business we can stand to have in that avenue. But then there's the direct to consumer side. And that's where we have the ability to fine tune our offering and to find, more steaks or more roast, or, like we launched, nobody has any money to spend on food. And I understand that. Going to the grocery store is like, oh my God, it costs what to buy toilet paper? But so we created a line of more cost effective steaks. Not everybody can eat a ribeye or a New York strip or a filet as often as they like. So we created a chuck steak, a round steak, and an eye round steak. And so there, for every middle meat, high value, high retail item, we've got a corresponding more cost effective steak that we're happy to provide because we don't have to grind it to put it in ground beef to sell through our wholesale channels. So, we've had a lot of fun over the last 12 months, defining what we need each sales channel to provide for us. And that wholesale sales channel is very consistent, very steady orders. And the retail, for better or worse, is seasonal. People don't order in July and August when they're vacationing with their children and studying abroad and doing whatever people do during those months. They sure as hell aren't ordering online, I know. But they complement each other, and it takes both of them. At the end of the day, our business is way better because we have a wholesale arm and a direct-to-consumer arm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense intuitively from a business perspective, like having the steady but lower profit margin of wholesale, and then obviously the more profitable but more fluctuating retail. Do you think, like, how do you mitigate the amount of control that the retailer has from y'all's perspective? Because if it's like the same type of retailers, and I don't know if they know that like y'all need a certain amount. I'm assuming they would know that a farm needs a certain amount of recurring revenue to operate properly. How do you mitigate them just going all willy-nilly with their control?
Yeah. So the good news for us is the grocery stores that we've worked with, we've either A, worked with them for over a decade, or B, we walk step and stride together. So, I talk to all of our grocery partners at least monthly, and most of them, every other week. And it's, hey, we really appreciate the orders. This is great. A little too much. Can we maybe take some from here and catch up next week? Or, hey, we need to step on the gas. Holy cow, orders are way lower than we expected. Can we stimulate things with a 50-cent, coupon or ad or something? And all of them are, really open to relationships with people like us. They respect the fact that, if they call and they say, hey, we need 48,000 fillets for Valentine's Day, which is in 2 weeks. Thanks, bye. We can't do that.
Yeah.
And so we've been blessed with grocery partners that really want to work with us so that we can make the most of what we have to offer.
That is cool. And that's cool to have relationships with companies like that can sort of understand where y'all are coming from and actually believe in the mission too.
That's right.
One thing that I've seen that's, from my perspective, it's growing in a lot of popularity is buying bulk beef. Just because I think the food sovereignty, knowing that, hey, I have food for, this is why I love the idea of hunting and hopefully one day being able to kill an elk and moose and things of that sort. Literally being able to just scratch off food. Like, okay, I have food for me and my family for the next year and a half. Cool. How is that played out for y'all? Is bulk beef, is that a strong part of y'all's business?
Absolutely. I didn't really think it was that big of a deal. I honestly had no idea that the demand was such that people wanted the eighth of a cow, the fourth of a cow, the half cow, the whole cow. I didn't know that was what people wanted, but we are, I managed customer service in addition to order fulfillment. And, we kept on getting these requests like, oh my gosh, if I could just get, this much, then I wouldn't have to pay for shipping. I wouldn't have to come pick it up every 2 weeks. It would make my life so much easier. Meal planning, meal prepping. So we put the packages up, which are, they're either bundles that we curate, that move through inventory in a very steady way, or they're, the eighth of a cow, fourth of a cow, half a cow, whole cow. And they're routinely our best sellers, which is, that's what I want. I would much rather sell somebody, $500 worth of a bulk purchase twice a year, as opposed to every month, $200. It's better for shipping. It's better for, the box and cooler that I have to ship it in. It's a much better deal.
Yeah, I'm pretty curious because I'm coming to Atlanta for a wedding in May. And so maybe I'll I don't know if you guys ship or something, or maybe I can drive down there and pick it up or something. But
we can ship it to your dad's house.
Okay, maybe we'll do that then, and I'll just take some back to Austin because that's what I'm leaning towards. Just because like you said, it's also I feel like the same deal with the retail. Like you guys getting 100, I don't even know how many. Like let's say 100 bulk orders is obviously going to be better than because that's income that's like more steady than getting fluctuating every month, or maybe this month's bad for somebody and they can't spend at White Oak Pastures or whatever. But regardless, yeah, I'll talk to you after this. Maybe we can get that set up. That would be awesome.
For sure.
How do you think ranchers win in the current American climate? Like, how do you think that people like yourself and your dad and your sister and the people of White Oak Pastures and the many of other people in the agricultural industry in America, how do you think that they win?
I think that we continue doing what we do. There are certainly tough times ahead, but we've overcome some tough times too. I think we have to continue providing, the service of responsibly raised and processed animals. I think that we continue to educate consumers so that they have a desire to know their farmer. I think that we have to evolve and make buying from us convenient. I think people value their time probably more than they value much anything else. And so it has to be convenient. It has to be understandable. And, we have to deliver proper expectations. I think that over time, things are going to get more and more interesting with regard to the ownership of land, the production of food. I should not even say production of food, the manufacturing of food. Food's not even really produced anymore. It's made somewhere. Very few people grow food ingredients. They grow ingredients that go into making food. So I think that think times are getting more and more interesting. And if we can just continue to hold on to what we have, perfect our trade, get better at it, find those little nuggets and gems of efficiencies, I think we will win. I'm far more optimistic than my father. My dad is a half glass empty, half glass full, but most of the time half glass empty guy.
Yeah.
And I really do think that this new generation of purchasers that are, standing with buying power want products that are raised in a certain way that have a certain effect on the communities that they're in. I think that that's something us and other farms like ours are really good at.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of really important things in my opinion. Number one, Austin, like one thing you'll notice real soon after getting to Austin and spending any amount of time is the density of people that care about where their food comes from is, I would argue, it's probably the highest in the country. I mean, I'm talking the farmers market in Mueller is crazy. There's farmers markets all over the city. There's local pastures, which is like 2 ranches basically combined to have a little trailer store in the city because they're outside of the city. So they ship their meat there and then people go there and buy it. It's so cool to see. It really is. Like we'll have grill outs here and 90% of the steaks will be pasture raised, regeneratively raised from ranches in the area, which is so cool.
That's great.
And the other thing is like the optimism part, just the idea that it is shifting. You just have to adapt. And I think that's like one of the other big things is a lot of farms sort of, they die in their stubbornness. They're not willing to adapt. And that's what y'all have done so beautifully. And obviously the business is, I think it's going to continue to grow. Hopefully maybe another Rogan episode at some point here too, to take things to the next level. But yeah, I just admire and respect what y'all are doing so much.
Well, I appreciate it. And at the end of the day, your job is as valuable or more valuable than ours. And you're helping bridge the gap between consumers that know they want something different and farmers that are doing that different thing. And so, if change is going to happen, it's going to happen with the consumer. And that's when we rely so heavily on people like you in this podcast to help us, move the needle with consumer demand. Yeah,
the voting with your dollar. I'm a firm believer that your vote is cast with your dollar, not necessarily your ballot anymore. I think that's probably one of the truths in today's world is what you give your money to will grow and will continue to be. So if we want to support people that are doing the right thing by them, the community, the animals, the land, and really everybody, then we have to spend money to do it. So, but
we get to decide what we want the future to be. And we do that by supporting them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean,